on Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out, we are talking about getting organized. Have you ever gone on a massive purging spree and thrown away something you love? Do you do a little bit in different areas but never seem to finish one complete room? Can you never find anything because you have numerous places to store it? If you have done some decluttering and are ready to organize, we have you covered today. Let's begin our month as we focus on getting organized.
Ready to clear your clutter and share your gifts with the world? Every Tuesday at 1 p.m., join award-winning professional organizer, author, and certified life coach Julie Coraccio on clearing the clutter inside and out, as she teaches you how to navigate the waters to declutter your life. Julie Coraccio destroys the box and examines clutter in all areas: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, relationships, health, finances, and more.
All right, everyone, I'm going wild and crazy. We're still going to talk about clutter. Clutter is always going to come into every podcast I do. However, we had a couple of requests from some listeners and viewers for me to talk about organizing. Remember, everything is archived, so if you aren't ready to get organized, it's no big deal. I wanted to share some statistics with you from a blog post I got from sharespace.com. Where do you see yourself in these statistics? The average American credit card debt is over $15,185. Now, I was at the gym the other day, just yesterday, and a little thing came up. It was a commercial for loans or something, and they said it's now $16,000. We also have about $7,000 of unwanted items in our home. Now, if you do something like a garage sale, you're never going to get that much back usually when you sell items, whether it's a garage sale, putting them on Craigslist. But let's say you got half of that. You could potentially have $3,500 worth of stuff that you could sell sitting in your home. It's estimated that 15 billion in unused tech gadgets in junk drawers worldwide. That works out to about $2,200 per drawer or attic, depending on where you're stashing them. The average woman has about 27 pairs of shoes, and men have 12. Both have an average of 88 articles of clothing each. 25% of those clothes are unworn. 85% of couples say they argue about clutter and disorganization. Managing volumes of clutter has been linked to elevated levels of stress. 23% of adults say they pay their bills late because they lose them. 80% of clutter is due to disorganization, not lack of space. There are almost 40,000 self-storage facilities in the U.S., and demand has doubled from 1994 to 2004. Here in Raleigh, where I live, we drive by every day, there's a major thoroughfare, and they just finished a huge storage unit. It has in big letters, climate control. It is literally next to another storage unit. Crisis purchases could account for 15 to 20% of household budgets, and that's due to buying duplicates, last-minute shopping trips, etc. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, for homes that have a two-car garage, 25% of people don't park any cars in the garage, and only 32% have room to park one garage. Now, based on my neighborhood, that's a very accurate statistic. Do you see yourself in any of those statistics? Is there anything that you could work on? I'd encourage you, get a notebook, use an app, jot down some of those statistics, and take a good guess at what your statistics are. That might serve as a good motivation for you to clear your clutter or get organized. Today, I'm going to talk about the basics of organizing. This is how I was taught. Most people who teach are going to credit Julie Morgenstern with the nuts and bolts of how organizing is done, and most people have learned from. I'm not sure if there is anyone else out there. I always try to give credit where credit is due. I'd say probably a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is based on her principles. I've read a lot of books, taken classes, and most of what I'll talk about today is probably her basic principles and teachings, and that maybe some people have shuffled around or used differently. And then, of course, I've always thrown my spin and things that I've learned into the mix, but I always like to give credit where credit was due. Now, I'm always going to encourage you to declutter before you get organized. I always tell clients, I'm never going to force you to throw out anything, but encourage you to always try and do some type of decluttering. Sometimes people don't want to declutter and get organized. That's okay. Wherever you are, it's okay. Although our guest this month is going to have a special aha moment related to this, and I can't wait for her to share that with you. But that's coming up later in the month. This isn't one of the basic steps, but I'm going to encourage you to do some planning. It's kind of one of those, a stitch in time saves nine. Try and figure out if you will want to do a monthly organizing project, or you're going to break it down into weekly tasks, or you're going to say, hey, I'm just going to go for it and try to get a project completed in a weekend. I encourage you to write it down, whether it's your to-do list, an app. I say this for everything. If we don't write it down, it won't likely get done. I'd be lost without my to-do list. I have been using legal pages for ages and will probably never change that. Once you've figured out the time, block it out on the calendar. I'd also suggest, although this isn't necessary to do, a complete inventory of your space. What areas of room need completely organized, minor work, and none. Plan on organizing one room or one project at a time. I am planting this seed now because I've seen many people flit and fleet from one project to the next and never accomplish anything. Again, there's nothing wrong with this, but if this is you, you might want to consider hiring someone. A professional can come in and see things you can't. Finally, this is something I suggest to my clients to do or think about prior to organizing and decluttering. Create a vision for each room and how you want it to feel. I'm hanging out in my office now. I want this to feel inspiring. I want it to be a place where I can be creative. I also want it to be serious and organized because this is where I run my business from. I have got 2 cats that I need to have a certain lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. If you're a cat owner, you'll completely understand that. But in all seriousness, I need to be organized here because it's where I run my business from. But I also bring in the inspiration. I also bring in the creativity. You don't have to have just one feel for the room. For example, I want my bedroom to feel loving, relaxed, warm, and comfortable. So I'd encourage you, take the time and think about what you'd like to create for the vision for each room. All right, should you start small or start big? If you find organizing and decluttering really challenging, I'm going to encourage you to start small. You can do something like a purse, a wallet, a drawer, or maybe even one bookshelf. Note, if you do only one part of the whole, you may need to do work later. But if you're just trying to warm up, get those organizing muscles going, consider starting small. The advantages of this is it's less overwhelming. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I talk about this a lot. Many times people become so overwhelmed and they just stop. It's easy practice. You can do one of these items usually in about 10 or 15 minutes. It's quick and easy, and you can see immediate results. That's going to help boost your confidence and say, okay, I did this, I can tackle something bigger now. Should you start big? And what I mean by this is an entire room. So if you're like, you know what, I'm a pretty good organizer, I'm pretty good at decluttering, and I'm ready to rock and roll and start big. Here are some questions that I'd ask yourself if you're looking for a room or area to do. What's driving you crazy? If something's driving you nuts, I go to make a meal in the kitchen and it's disorganized. I've got to get it organized so I can cook healthier meals. Where do you spend most of the time? If you're hanging out in the TV room and it's in complete disarray, consider starting there. Or anything that needs urgent attention. For example, your office because the bills aren't getting paid on time. Before we actually start organizing, I'm going to recommend that you take time to gather your supplies. Again, if we do this planning and get ready to roll, it's going to save us time and headache in the long run. Large, strong trash bags. Think about those leaf and garden bags that are to hold garden waste or lawn waste. They really hold up. Boxes or bags, and I'm going to encourage you that you might need as many for donate, return, repair, recycle, sell, another location. And what I mean by that is you might find something in the garage that actually belongs in the bedroom. And trash. Depending on what area you're doing, have a dustbuster or vacuum, a dust cloth or cleaner, or a broom and dustpan. My idea is like, hey, if you're already in there, you might as well clean it. If you are going to be going through papers, have a folders and a Sharpie to mark things. You can use paper index cards to tape or label piles. I don't recommend using stickies because they can fall off, and I see that more often than not. I'd encourage you to have a notebook or app. So if something comes up, hey, I got to check with mom. What's that heirloom? What's this family story behind it? That you can write it down. Remember, I mentioned that earlier, write it down. If you're going to be doing filing and papers, consider having a box. I'm a huge fan of those banker boxes. I still have some from when I moved out from Los Angeles because they are so great to store paper. Have beverage and snacks. It's really important to keep hydrated. So make sure you have water in there, and preferably in a BPA-free water bottle. And then have music. Have whatever uplifts you, keep you energized, make it fun. I think so many times people are like, boring when it comes to decluttering and getting organized. And it can be real work depending on what your situation is. So bring some enjoyment in there.
Started to organize and got stuck? Need questions answered or customized solutions? Looking for a professional organizer to bounce ideas? Go to reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn how Julie Coraccio can help.
All right, the basic steps to getting organized. First, we're going to sort and separate. And I'd encourage you, start with what's out. So for example, I'm sitting here in my office. If I had a pile of clutter on the floor, which I don't, that's where I would start. Okay, so let's look at there's a pile of clutter on the floor if I don't. So for instance, we have a kind of credenza. If there was a pile of clutter on top, I would start there. I wouldn't start within the drawer because remember, I want to start with what's out. Or for instance, the bookcase, which is open. So start where it's out and you can see what's going on. Now you're going to, as you're sorting and separating, you want to group items how you associate. I don't care what Martha Stewart does. I don't care what your next door neighbor does. I want it with how you would associate it. So if you were going to look for something and to retrieve it, what would you call it? That is a kind of a guide that might be helpful. Create broad categories. For instance, if you are an exercise fanatic and you have a ton of t-shirts, have exercise t-shirts. Don't micro it down into yoga, running, exercise, weightlifting. Now you can do that, except that the challenge when that is, it's going to be really hard for you to maintain. And you can get the little drawer dividers to do that, but I have found in my experience, unless you are committed and you have the time, if you do something like that, a lot of times it's going to go back to clutter. Now remember, stay focused in one area. So if you're working on the bookcase, if you're working on things on the floor, do not move on until that area is completed. Now I mentioned earlier when we were gathering our supplies, so you're starting to sort and separate. We have an area for your containers. And just as a reminder again, those are return, donate, sell, repair, recycle, trash, another location, give to a friend. All right, so we've sorted and separated. You have what's left to get organized. You have your bag you're going to donate to your friend. You have your bag you're going to donate to the charity. You've released what you're going to trash. And my note is, if you wouldn't give it to a family or friend, do not donate it to a charity. If it's worn, ripped, rusty, just let it go. I try to be as green as possible, but sometimes when something's just outworn its lifetime, be a friend and let it go. Okay, so we have what's left to get organized. You're going to want to find a home. So each item is going to have one consistent home. I once posted on Facebook about gifts. Where do people hide their gifts? Which was holiday time. And someone said I put them in 5 different places and then I forget where I put them and then I find them later in the year. So one consistent home. You're going to want to match the size for the item. So for instance, you probably aren't going to want to put bulky sweaters in shallow drawers. One, because you'd probably only fit one in, but that would be kind of a pain in the butt to put in and out. So for instance, you might put scarves or belts or something that would fit a shallow drawer better. One functions. So for instance, I mentioned the t-shirts. Keep all your t-shirts in a drawer. Keep all your shorts in another drawer. Don't mix and match. Now you can keep things that are similar near to each other. So for instance, in one of my drawers, I have hose. I don't wear a lot of hose. Actually, I don't even think I have hose, but I have tights. So I have my tights and socks in one drawer because I don't have that many tights. So they're the same area and they're divided, but they're right next to each other. Make sure that everything is easy to retrieve and return. Remember how I mentioned a moment ago about the sweater. If you're like trying to jam the sweater in there, you're probably not going to put it back, and then it's going to become a pile that's going to morph bigger and bigger. So you don't want to jam too many things or stack things too high that you can't reach them. Containers. Choose containers that fit your lifestyle and style. So as I sit here looking at my desk, here, I'll actually hold one up. I've got my bills to do. So I bought these, I kind of upgraded recently because I repurpose everything, but as my business has upgraded, I wanted a new look. So for instance, I have these mesh silver trays that are last year's organizing items. That kind of cracked me up. I went to Ollie's and found that out. So I like mesh so I can see. I also have purple containers that I work with a coach every month. So all my materials from my coach are in the purple container. So as you can see, purple background if you're watching this on YouTube. So I want color. I want things that are functional. I want the color if it's purple. For things that I need to reference more often, I want something like mesh that I can stand through. You want to make sure they can withstand repeated use. If they're flimsy and fall apart, you're going to stop using them. Now, the container I just showed you, that's the silver mesh one I got at Ollie's. Again, it was quote unquote last year's organizing style. Well, it was still really well made, and at a good price, I was willing to buy it. You also want to have space for room to grow. Now, I'm about to, after I get all the podcast shot, I will go through, it's time to go through some bills. And so that's full, a little more full than usual, but it fits a month's worth of bills for me to go through. Measure, measure, measure. Did I talk about measuring? This is really important. You're going to want to look at the height, width, and depth and number of items to be stored. So, hey, say you have a lot of CDs or movies or something. So you're going to want to measure all of that. And then the height, width, the depth, the space container is going to go. So for instance, if you have a container for all your CDs and that's going to go in a shelf in your entertainment room and your entertainment system, you want to make sure, okay, what's the shelf, the diameters and the measurements of the shelf that I'm going to put this container on. Take the tape measure to the store. And I have measured and gone to some store and said, these are the measurements that'll fit, and they've messed up. So take your own tape measure to double check and don't always trust what they tell you in the store. Now, when it comes to containers or for instance, filings, people say that white labels with bold black letters look best and that you can color coordinate from there. I'm all about color. So my files, I have all my purple files are for personal, and they're personal purple hanging files and as well as purple folders. Do what feels good to you, what inspires you, because you're going to be using these containers. I've had clients who've been uninspired in their office space and don't like things like that, and they haven't wanted to work in the area. So take the time to get containers that work for you. I'm a huge fan of repurposing, and I'm going to talk about that later this month. So that's where you can have a lot of fun and get creative and use what is around your home to get organized. Maintain. Once you set up an organizational system, you need to maintain it. I've mentioned a couple times, if you don't put it back or if it doesn't fit, and then it's going to fall on the floor and become clutter again. So you need to make sure you have a system that you're going to maintain and works with your habits and lifestyle. Now, I always say to people, set aside 5 to 10 minutes daily. When I'm at the end of my day, my desk is clean. I put away papers if I put them out, put away my pens and pencils. And so when I come to the office in the morning, I'm ready to roll. Same thing with my work bag that I have for clients. So it's prepared for a client. I go out. When I come back, I go through it. Do I have any trash that I need to throw out? Does it need to be reorganized? Am I missing any supplies? So that the next time I have a client, it's ready to roll. If you can't do something daily, considering doing something once a week. Schedule it on the calendar, write it down. Get the family involved. I've seen a lot of times with families, the burden to decluttering and getting organized falls to one person. So make sure if you live with a partner, if you have kids, that you get everyone involved in some level. Some days you're going to miss it. That's okay. You just have to make up for it. And do an annual purge. If you've listened to the podcast, I talk about it. We do a purge once a year. And we have kind of gotten in the habit of, in some cases, doing things like our closet more than once a year. Okay, it's the end of the season. What didn't we wear? Let's release it. Because I'm all about is just letting the stuff go. Take actions from today's podcast. Take the time to plan and block off time for your project. A little planning before getting started will save you time down the road. Consider doing an inventory of your home or space that you are organizing. Pick one room or area to begin. Do not move on to another project room, or area until you've completed what you started. Create a maintenance plan and commit to following it. On next week's episode, I'm going to talk about quick organizing tips for all rooms in the home. Go out, clear the clutter to create the life you choose, deserve, and desire.
Ready to live a more joyful and fulfilling life? Sign up for our newsletter at reawakenyourbrilliance.com and receive a free copy of 10 Steps to Clearing Clutter Inside and Out. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review Clearing the Clutter Inside and Out. See you next Tuesday at 1 p.m.